My hands shook as I knocked on Carla Abel's office door. After 3 months of enduring Steve Baldwin's harassment, I finally found courage to report him. Steve was a senior manager who thought his position gave him the right to humiliate me daily. He made crude jokes about my appearance, threw paper at me during meetings, and once cornered me in the supply room, breathing down my neck while making inappropriate comments. "Come in," Carla called from inside. I stepped into her office, my heart pounding. Carla sat behind her massive desk, barely looking up from her computer. She was known for her cold efficiency and sharp tongue. "What do you want, innocent?" she asked, finally meeting my eyes with obvious irritation. I took a deep breath. "I need to file a harassment complaint against Steve Baldwin." Carla's eyebrows shot up, and then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. Not just a chuckle, but a full, mocking laugh that made my cheeks burn with shame. "Harassment?" she said, wiping fake tears from her eyes. "What did big bad Steve do? Hurt your feelings?" I stood there, stunned, as she continued to smirk at me like I was the punchline to a joke. "Steve has been making inappropriate comments about my body," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He throws things at me during meetings, and last week he cornered me in the supply room." "Stop right there," Carla interrupted, holding up her hand. "You sound like a whiny child. This is corporate America, not kindergarten. If you can't handle some workplace banter, maybe you're too sensitive for this environment." My mouth fell open. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was supposed to be a safe space where employees could report problems. But he touched my shoulder and... "Did he assault you?" Carla asked sharply. "Well, no, but..." "Then you have no case. Steve is one of our top performers. He brings in millions for this company. You're a junior analyst who's easily replaceable." She turned back to her computer, dismissing me completely. My advice? Grow a thicker skin or find another job. I stumbled out of her office, my face burning with humiliation. Several co-workers in the hallway had clearly heard our conversation through the thin walls. They quickly looked away, pretending to be busy. As I walked past the break room, I heard Carla's voice again, talking to someone on the phone. "You should have seen his face," Carla was saying, her voice full of amusement. "Little innocent came crying to me about Steve Baldwin. I told him to grow up or get out." I froze outside the break room door, listening to her mock me to whoever was on the other end. "These millennials are so soft," she continued. "Can't handle a little teasing without running to HR. I swear, they want participation trophies for everything." Her laughter echoed through the hallway, and I felt my stomach twist with shame and anger. Other employees walked past me, some giving me sympathetic looks, others avoiding eye contact entirely. I rushed to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall. My hands were shaking as I sat there, trying to process what had just happened. The woman whose job was to protect employees had just thrown me under the bus and then bragged about it. I heard footsteps enter the bathroom and hushed voices outside my stall. "Did you hear what happened to Innocent?" someone whispered. "Yeah, brutal. Carla's telling everyone he's a crybaby. Poor guy. Steve's been picking on him for months." The voices faded as they left, but their words stayed with me. Everyone knew about the harassment, and now everyone knew I'd been humiliated for trying to stop it. The next few days were torture. Word had spread throughout the office that I'd complained to HR and been shot down. Some people gave me pitying looks, while others seemed to enjoy the gossip. Steve himself strutted around with even more confidence, making snide comments about sensitive people. I was eating lunch alone at my desk when I noticed a small piece of paper had been slipped under my keyboard. I looked around the office, but everyone seemed focused on their work. I unfolded the note carefully. "Coffee after work. Luigi's Cafe on 5th Street. You need to know the truth. Come alone." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was neat and careful. My heart started racing. Someone wanted to meet me secretly, and they knew something about the truth. But what truth? And who had sent this? I spent the rest of the day trying to figure out who could have left the note. Was it someone trying to help me, or was this some kind of trap? Maybe Steve or Carla had put someone up to this. But as 5 p.m. approached, my curiosity got the better of me. I needed answers, and this mysterious person might have them. I grabbed my jacket and headed for Luigi's Cafe, my stomach churning with anticipation. Luigi's Cafe was busy with the after-work crowd, but I spotted them immediately. Marina Torres from accounting sat in a corner booth, nervously stirring her coffee. She was a quiet woman in her 40s who'd worked at the company for over a decade. I approached her table cautiously. "Marina? Did you send me that note?" She nodded, gesturing for me to sit. "Keep your voice down," she whispered, glancing around the cafe. "We can't be too careful." "What's this about?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Marina reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. "You're not the first person Carla has destroyed for filing complaints. Over the past 5 years, at least 8 employees have reported harassment or discrimination. All of their complaints mysteriously disappeared." She pushed the flash drive across the table to me. "These are copies of emails and files I've been collecting. Carla has been covering up for executives and senior managers, protecting them while destroying anyone who speaks up." My hands trembled as I picked up the drive. "How did you get these?" "I handle payroll and benefits," Marina explained. "I see everything that comes through HR, settlements paid to silence victims, falsified performance reviews to justify firing whistleblowers, even forged documents." She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "Innocent, you stumbled into something much bigger than just your harassment complaint. Carla isn't just incompetent, she's actively covering up crimes." That night, I sat at my KitFox table with my laptop, the flash drive Marina had given me plugged in. File after file revealed a pattern of corruption that made my stomach turn. Complaint after complaint had been buried, with victims either fired, transferred, or bought off with small settlements. One case particularly caught my attention. 2 years ago, a woman named Casey Williams had reported her supervisor for sexual harassment. Instead of investigating, Carla had written internal memos describing Casey as unstable and attention-seeking. Within 3 months, Casey had been fired for performance issues. Another file showed how Carla had altered time records to make it appear that a discrimination victim had been frequently late to work, justifying his termination. The original records showed perfect attendance. But the most disturbing discovery was a series of emails between Carla and various executives. They joked about problem employees and discussed strategies for managing complainers. In one particularly sickening exchange, they laughed about making victims' lives so miserable they would quit on their own. As I read deeper into the files, one name kept appearing as a reference in older cases, someone who had apparently tried to expose the corruption years ago but had mysteriously left the company. The name was Dr. Helen Ford, and according to the files, she had been building a case against Carla before suddenly resigning. The next morning, I was called into a conference room for what I assumed was a routine meeting. Instead, I found Carla sitting at the head of the table with Steve Baldwin beside her. My heart sank as I realized this was an ambush. "Sit down, innocent," Carla said coldly. "We need to discuss your behavior." "My behavior?" I asked, confused. Steve leaned forward with a smug smile. "Several employees have reported that you've been creating a hostile work environment. Making people uncomfortable with your accusations and conspiracy theories." I stared at him in disbelief. "Conspiracy theories?" "I reported harassment, which is my right as an employee." "Your right doesn't include spreading rumors and making false allegations." We have multiple witnesses who say you've been acting erratically and making wild claims about cover-ups. She slid a piece of paper across the table to me. This is a formal written warning. Any further disruptive behavior will result in immediate termination. The document accused me of creating a hostile work environment through unfounded accusations and displaying unprofessional behavior that interferes with normal business operations. I haven't done anything wrong, I protested, but even as I said it, I knew they didn't care about the truth. Sign the warning, innocent, Carla ordered. This is your only chance to keep your job. My hand shook as I signed the paper, knowing I had no choice but to comply. That evening, I sat in my apartment feeling defeated. They had turned the tables on me, making me the problem while protecting the real perpetrator. I stared at my laptop screen, considering whether I should just give up and look for another job. Then I remembered Dr. Helen Ford, the woman whose name kept appearing in Marina's files. If she had tried to expose Carla's corruption, maybe she could help me understand what I was really up against. I searched for her on social media and found her LinkedIn profile. She was now working as an independent consultant, specializing in workplace discrimination cases. Her photo showed a woman in her 50s with kind eyes. I sent her a message explaining who I was and asking if we could talk. I didn't expect a response, but within an hour, my phone rang with an unknown number. Innocent, a warm voice asked. This is Helen Ford. I got your message, and yes, we definitely need to talk. We arranged to meet at a small restaurant outside the city the next evening. As I hung up the phone, I felt a spark of hope for the first time in days. Maybe I wasn't as alone in this fight as I thought. Be careful who you trust at work, Helen warned before ending the call. Carla has eyes and ears everywhere. Helen looked exactly like someone who had fought corporate corruption and lived to tell about it. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore a simple blue suit that somehow conveyed both professionalism and rebellion. I tried to expose Carla 5 years ago, she said after we ordered coffee. I had documentation of 12 cases where she had covered up harassment complaints. I thought I had enough evidence to bring her down. What happened? I asked. Helen's face darkened. She destroyed my career. Falsified my performance reviews, spread rumors that I was having a mental breakdown, and eventually forced me to choose between resigning quietly or being fired with cause. She pulled out a tablet and showed me photos of documents. I kept copies of everything, but without insider support, it wasn't enough to make a case stick. The board believed Carla's version of events. So there's no way to stop her? I asked, feeling my hope deflate. I didn't say that, Helen replied with a slight smile. You have something I never had: allies inside the company. Marina Torres reached out to me months ago. She's been carefully documenting everything, waiting for the right moment. Helen leaned across the table. But here's what you need to understand, innocent. Carla isn't just corrupt, she's smart and ruthless. If she thinks you're a real threat, she'll destroy you completely. Then what do? You build a case so strong that even she can't wriggle out of it. Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully began reaching out to other employees who I suspected had been victims of the system. I was subtle about it, mentioning casual conversations about workplace fairness and seeing who responded with knowing looks or bitter comments. Slowly, a picture emerged. There was Ezra Webb from IT, who had reported age discrimination and been transferred to a dead-end position. There was Sophie Fox from marketing, who had complained about a sexually hostile environment and suddenly found herself excluded from important meetings. But the most valuable ally turned out to be someone I didn't expect: Danny Kim from the mailroom. He had access to documents throughout the building and had noticed patterns in how certain files were handled. I've seen Carla shred documents, he told me during a careful conversation by the vending machines. Always late at night when she thinks no one's watching. But I work late shifts, and I've seen her destroy stuff that looked official. We established a small network of people who communicated carefully, sharing information through coded messages and brief conversations. Marina coordinated everything, using her position in accounting to track suspicious financial transactions related to settlements and cover-ups. But our careful planning almost came to an end when Sophie approached me with a worried expression. "Danny, I think someone knows we're talking," she whispered. "Carla asked me specifically about our conversations yesterday." My blood ran cold. If Carla suspected we were organizing, she would move quickly to shut us down. The retaliation came faster than I expected. Within a week of Sophie's warning, I was called into another meeting with Carla and my direct supervisor, Mr. Peterson. "Innocent, we've been reviewing your performance," Peterson said uncomfortably. It was clear he didn't want to be there, but Carla was obviously pulling the strings. She slid a fake performance review across the table. According to the document, my work quality had suddenly plummeted, I was missing deadlines, and multiple colleagues had complained about my attitude. "This is completely false," I said, reading through the fabricated criticisms. "I've never missed a deadline, and my last real performance review was excellent." "Are you calling me a liar?" Carla asked dangerously. "I'm saying this review doesn't reflect reality," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. "Innocent, perhaps you've been under stress lately." Carla leaned forward. "This is your final warning. Any further performance issues will result in immediate termination. You're already on thin ice after your previous behavioral problems." As I signed the fraudulent review, I made a silent vow. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. But they had no idea what they were unleashing. "Is there anything else?" I asked, standing up. "Just remember, Innocent," Carla said with a cold smile, "this company doesn't tolerate troublemakers." I understood perfectly. The war was officially on. That night, I called Helen Ford and told her about the fake performance review. Instead of being discouraged, she sounded almost excited. "Perfect," she said. "This is exactly what we need: evidence of retaliatory behavior. Do you still have access to your real performance reviews?" "Marina saved copies in her files," I replied. "Good. Now listen carefully. We need to document everything, but we also need to be smarter than Carla. She's going to expect you to fight back openly, so we're going to do the opposite." Helen explained her strategy. Instead of confronting Carla directly, we would feed her false information while secretly building our real case. We would make her overconfident and careless. The key is making her think she's winning while we gather evidence of her crimes. "One more thing," Helen added. "I've been doing some research, and I found something interesting. There's a board member named William Foster who's been asking questions about HR policies lately. He might be the ally we need." The next day, I started my secret campaign against Carla, armed with a plan and the knowledge that I wasn't fighting alone anymore. My first test came sooner than expected. During a team meeting, I deliberately let slip some false information about employees supposedly planning to quit over harassment issues. I made it seem like accidental gossip, something I shouldn't have shared. Within hours, Marina texted me with a coded message: "Fish took the bait." Sure enough, Carla had immediately called an emergency meeting with department heads to discuss employee retention issues. She was clearly worried that word was spreading about her mishandling of complaints. But our small victory was tempered by a setback. Ezra Webb, who had been one of our early allies, suddenly started avoiding us. When I finally cornered him in the parking garage, he looked nervous and ashamed. "I can't do this anymore, Innocent," he said. "Carla offered me a promotion to senior IT analyst. All I have to do is distance myself from certain troublemakers." My heart sank. "Ezra, you know what she's doing is wrong." "I have a family to support," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "I can't afford to lose this job over principles." As he walked away, I realized that Carla was using both threats and bribes to break apart our network. We had to be more careful about who we trusted. The next day brought an unexpected opportunity. Tommy Andrew from maintenance mentioned that he often worked late cleaning the executive floors and sometimes overheard interesting conversations. "That HR lady," he said quietly while fixing a broken cabinet in our break room, "she stays really late sometimes. Has loud phone calls about making people disappear from the company." "What kind of conversations?" I asked casually. "Stuff about getting rid of problem employees and keeping the bosses happy. Real nasty stuff." That evening, I decided to take a calculated risk. I stayed late at the office, hiding in an unused conference room near Carla's office. Around 9 p.m., when the building was mostly empty, I heard her voice through the thin walls. Using my phone, I carefully recorded as she bragged to someone about crushing that little worm Innocent and discussed strategies for managing complainers before they become real problems. The smoking gun came when she laughed about how easy it was to make people disappear when the executives need protection. I had her admitting to systematic retaliation and cover-ups. But as I tried to leave quietly, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart pounded as I realized someone else was still in the building. Tommy appeared around the corner with his cleaning cart, and I breathed a sigh of relief. He saw me and gave a small nod, understanding immediately what I was doing. The recording was good, but I needed more evidence to build an unshakable case. That's when Tommy proved to be an unexpected ally. "I've been saving things," he told me during a private conversation in the building's basement. "Papers I found in her trash, USB drives she thought were destroyed. I never knew what to do with it all." He led me to a storage closet where he kept a box full of documents that Carla had tried to destroy. There were draft memos discussing how to neutralize complainers, email printouts about covering up executive misconduct, and even financial records showing suspicious payments. Why? Air photographing documents when Marina appeared in the doorway. "We have a problem," she said urgently. "William Foster, that board member Helen mentioned? He's been asking questions about HR policies and employee complaints." Carla's panicking. This was both good and bad news. Good because it meant we had a potential ally at the board level. Bad because Carla would be extra paranoid and dangerous now. "There's something else," Marina continued. "I overheard Carla scheduling a private meeting with Foster for tomorrow. She's going to try to control the narrative before anyone else can reach him." We were running out of time. The next morning, I made the boldest move of my life. I researched William Foster and discovered he arrived at work early every day, often grabbing coffee from the shop across the street from our building. At 7 a.m., I positioned myself at that coffee shop and waited. When Foster walked in, a distinguished man in his 60s with gray hair and an expensive suit. I approached him carefully. "Mr. Foster? My name is Innocent Trump. I'm an employee at the company, and I believe you've been asking questions about HR policies." He studied me carefully. "What's this about?" "I have evidence of systematic corruption in our HR department. Harassment complaints being buried, victims being retaliated against, and executives being protected from accountability." Foster's expression grew serious. "That's a significant accusation, Mr. Trump." I handed him a folder containing copies of some of our most damning evidence. "I know Carla Abel has a meeting scheduled with you today. Before you hear her version of events, I thought you should see this." He accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. "Why should I trust you?" "Because in 2 hours, I'm probably going to be fired for speaking to you. Someone willing to sacrifice their job for the truth is someone worth listening to." Foster nodded slowly. "I'll review this material. If what you're suggesting is true, it represents a serious liability for the company." As I walked back to the office, I knew I had just crossed a line from which there was no return. I was right about being fired. At 10 a.m., I was called into Carla's office along with Mr. Peterson and a security guard. Carla's face was flushed with anger, and I could see the vein in her temple throbbing. "Sit down, innocent," she said through clenched teeth. Instead of sitting, I remained standing. "Is this about my conversation with Mr. Foster this morning?" Her face went white. "You had no authorization to contact board members." "I had every right as an employee to report workplace violations to appropriate authorities," I replied calmly. Peterson looked confused. "What conversation with Mr. Foster?" Carla shot him a warning look, but the damage was done. Now Peterson knew that I had reached out to the board level, which meant there were bigger issues at play. "Innocent," Carla said, trying to regain control, "your behavior has become increasingly erratic and disruptive. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated for cause." As I packed my personal items, several coworkers watched with obvious concern. Sophie gave me a worried look, while Tommy nodded slightly from across the room. But as the security guard escorted me out, I felt oddly calm. The ball was now in William Foster's court, and I had done everything I could. 2 days later, Helen Ford called me with exciting news. "Foster reviewed your evidence and launched an internal investigation. He's brought in an outside law firm to audit HR practices and interview employees confidentially." "What does that mean for Carla?" I asked. "She's been temporarily suspended pending the investigation's outcome. The board is taking this very seriously because they're worried about legal liability." But the best news was yet to come. "Innocent, they want to interview you formally as part of the investigation. This is your chance to present everything we've collected." The interview took place in a downtown law office with 3 investigators from the firm Foster had hired. For 2 hours, I laid out the entire case: the systematic burial of complaints, the retaliation against victims, the cover-up of executive misconduct, and the corruption we had uncovered. I presented Marina's financial evidence, Tommy's recovered documents, the recordings of Carla's conversations, and testimonies from other victims who had finally found the courage to speak up. "Mr. Trump," the lead investigator said when I finished, "this is one of the most comprehensive cases of HR misconduct we've ever seen. If even half of these allegations are proven true, there will be serious consequences." 2 weeks later, the investigation's preliminary findings were presented to the board. Carla Abel was terminated immediately, along with 2 executives who had been complicit in the cover-ups. But the best part was still to come. William Foster called me personally with an unexpected offer. "Innocent, the board has reviewed the investigation's findings and your role in exposing this corruption. We'd like to offer you a position as Director of Employee Relations, reporting directly to the board." I was stunned. "You want me to replace Carla?" "We want you to rebuild the entire HR function with integrity and transparency. Your salary would be double what you were making as an analyst, and you'd have full authority to investigate and resolve employee complaints." The irony was perfect. The company that had fired me for reporting harassment now wanted me to lead their efforts to prevent future harassment. "There's one condition," Foster continued. "Your first official act would be to formally terminate Carla Abel's employment and ensure she's banned from company property." I accepted the position immediately. 3 months later, I sat in Carla's old office, now completely redecorated, preparing for my first day as Director of Employee Relations. The nameplate outside read, "Innocent Trump," and I still couldn't quite believe it was real. Marina had been promoted to Assistant Director, and Tommy had been moved to a facilities management role with a substantial pay increase. Sophie had been transferred to a better position in marketing. My first official meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m., and I had invited Carla Abel to attend. Carla arrived exactly on time, escorted by building security as required for all terminated employees. She looked older than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes and a bitter expression that couldn't hide her defeat. "Please sit down, Ms. Abel," I said professionally, gesturing to the chair across from my desk, the same chair where I had sat months earlier when she mocked my harassment complaint. "You think you've won," she said without sitting down. "This isn't about winning or losing," I replied calmly. "It's about ensuring that what happened to me and many other employees never happens again." I slid a document across the desk. "This is your formal termination letter. It outlines the findings of the board's investigation and the reasons for your dismissal." She glanced at the letter but didn't pick it up. "They'll never prove anything in court. Actually, the investigation found evidence of 12 separate incidents of misconduct, including document destruction, retaliation against whistleblowers, and conspiracy to cover up harassment complaints. The company has already settled with 6 victims, and the district attorney is reviewing potential criminal charges." For the first time, Carla looked genuinely worried. "But here's what I really wanted to tell you," I continued. "Every employee who was silenced, transferred, or fired for speaking up is being offered their job back with full back pay. Every complaint that was buried is being properly investigated." Carla finally sat down, the fight going out of her. "I was just doing my job," Carla said weakly, her earlier defiance crumbling. "No," I replied firmly. "Your job was to protect employees from harassment and discrimination. Instead, you protected perpetrators and punished victims. That's not just incompetence, it's a betrayal of everything HR is supposed to represent." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "Do you know what the worst part was? When I came to you for help, scared and desperate, you laughed at me. You made me feel like my dignity didn't matter. When I turned back to face her, I saw tears in her eyes. I made mistakes," she admitted. "You made choices," I corrected. "Every time you buried a complaint, every time you retaliated against a victim, every time you protected an abuser, those were choices. And now you have to live with the consequences." The security guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, it's time to go." Carla stood up slowly, looking around the office one last time. "What happens now?" "Now you're banned from company property, your employment is terminated for cause with no severance, and your actions have been reported to relevant authorities. What happens next depends on whether prosecutors decide to file criminal charges." She walked toward the door, then paused. "You know, innocent, in a way, I'm almost proud of you. You showed more backbone than I gave you credit for. That's the difference between us, Carla. You thought backbone meant crushing people who were weaker than you. I learned that real strength comes from protecting people who can't protect themselves." After Carla left, I sat alone in my new office, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, I had been a junior analyst too scared to speak up about harassment. Now I was leading the effort to transform the company's culture. My first initiative was implementing an anonymous reporting system that bypassed traditional HR channels, sending complaints directly to the board and external investigators. We also established a victim support fund to provide counseling and legal assistance to employees who reported misconduct. But the most satisfying part was the wall I had installed behind my desk. It displayed photos and brief bios of employees who had shown courage in speaking up about workplace problems, people like Marina, Tommy, and Sophie who had risked their jobs to do what was right. The first addition to that wall was a photo of Dr. Helen Ford, along with a quote she had shared with me. "Sometimes the most important battles are fought by ordinary people who refuse to accept that injustice is normal." Marina knocked on my door. "Innocent, you have a visitor. Steve Baldwin is here." My former harasser stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable and defeated. He had been fired as part of the investigation's findings, and I knew he was facing potential criminal charges. "What do you want, Steve?" I asked. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "What I did to you and others was wrong." I studied Steve's face, looking for any sign that his apology was genuine rather than a calculated attempt to reduce his legal troubles. What I saw was a man who finally understood the pain he had caused others. I'm glad you recognize that your behavior was wrong, I said carefully. But an apology doesn't undo the damage you caused or excuse the harassment. Steve nodded. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I realize how badly I treated you and others. Steve, you made coming to work a daily nightmare for me. You humiliated me in front of colleagues, made crude comments about my appearance, and created a hostile environment that affected my health. He looked down at his hands. I told myself it was just joking around, but I knew it wasn't funny to you. I saw how it made you feel, and I kept doing it anyway. That's the part that makes your behavior unforgivable, I replied. It wasn't ignorance, it was cruelty. You knew you were hurting me, and you enjoyed it. Marina appeared in the doorway. Innocent, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have that conference call with the board in 5 minutes. Steve took the hint and stood up. I'll go now. Again, I'm sorry for everything. As he walked away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Justice had been served, but there was no joy in watching someone's life fall apart, even someone who had made mine miserable. The board meeting was a celebration of our progress. In the 6 months since taking over HR, we had resolved over 20 historical complaint cases, implemented new training programs, and created a culture where employees felt safe reporting problems. Innocent, William Foster said over the video conference, the transformation has been remarkable. Employee satisfaction surveys are at an all-time high, and we haven't had a single harassment complaint that wasn't handled properly. But the best news came from an unexpected source. Casey Williams, the woman whose harassment complaint had been buried years earlier, had accepted our offer to return to the company with full back pay and a promotion to department supervisor. I never thought I'd work here again, she told me during our first meeting. When Carla destroyed my career, I thought my life was over. Having the chance to start fresh and know that the company has truly changed means everything to me. After the meeting, I walked through the office floors, observing the transformation that had taken place. People smiled and greeted each other warmly. Conversations flowed freely without the undercurrent of fear that had once poisoned the workplace. Tommy waved from across the lobby, now wearing a supervisor's badge and carrying himself with new confidence. Marina passed by with a team of new HR analysts she was training, all of them committed to protecting rather than silencing employees. 1 year after Carla Abel's termination, I received a letter that perfectly captured the transformation we had achieved. Dear Mr. Trump, it began, my name is Ashley Kim, and I'm a new employee in the marketing department. During my orientation, I learned about the changes that took place here and the courage you showed in fighting for what was right. As someone who faced harassment at my previous job and was too scared to speak up, knowing that this company truly protects its employees means everything to me. Thank you for creating a place where people like me can work without fear. I framed that letter and hung it next to the photos of the brave employees who had helped expose the corruption. It reminded me daily why the fight had been worth it. The final piece of justice came when Carla Abel was convicted on criminal charges related to document destruction and conspiracy. She received 2 years in prison and was banned from working in HR for life. Steve Baldwin faced similar charges and received 1 year in prison plus mandatory counseling. Several other executives were fired and faced civil lawsuits from their victims. But the real victory wasn't in their punishment. It was in the knowledge that no future employee would have to endure what I and so many others had suffered. The company that had once mocked victims now protected them. As I sat in my office that evening, watching the sun set over the city, I reflected on the journey from victim to victor. Sometimes justice takes time, but it's worth fighting for.